Tanse, I'm Chris Anashkate. Welcome to APTN National News. Since the 2021 discovery of unmarked graves in Kamloops, BC, First Nations across this country have been doing their own work to search the grounds of former residential school sites. Now, one group from the Piapot First Nation north of Regina in Saskatchewan is sharing their knowledge on the ground-penetrating radar technology used to find unmarked graves. CTV's Mick Favel has more.
In the Fort Qu'Appelle Valley, students from the University of Winnipeg are hard at work, learning how to use ground-penetrating radar, technology that has been pivotal in the search for unmarked graves at residential school sites. Providing guidance is KNT IRS Consulting, an on-reserve company that specializes in ground searches associated with unmarked graves.
As our name in Creek, in search of the truth. So at the end of the day, that's our ultimate end goal, is to find the truth of the atrocities of the past and to change the narrative to a positive across Canada.
Using the equipment isn't the only lesson for students. They're also being introduced to Indigenous culture, which organizers say must happen for successful searches in the future.
These students, for the past week and a half, have been fully immersed, understanding, taking lectures on not only the equipment, but also the effects of the IRS system, talking to survivors, praying together, having cultural events together, because this work, it cannot be done in a bubble.
Joining students are members of the Piapot First Nation. Organizers say it's important for Indigenous people to know how to use the technology so they can take the lead on searches in their own communities.
We would like to have our own people, our own communities, be the ones to do the sacred work, to be in their own graveyards, their own sites, finding their ancestors with good thoughts, with proper ethic, and respecting the sites.
When finished, students will receive 6 credits towards their education, and Piapot members will be awarded a certificate. Mick Favel, CTV News, Piapot First Nation.
The Indigenous Identity Fraud Summit wrapped up this week in Winnipeg. It brought together some First Nations, Inuit, and Red River Métis leaders from across the country to discuss the ongoing issue. On its final day, leaders in attendance passed 2 support resolutions and a declaration on Indigenous identity fraud. The first resolution calls on the Canadian government and the Métis National Council to withdraw their support of Bill C-53. The second calls leaders who were in attendance to denounce, quote, illegitimate identity claims, end quote, of the Nunatuavut Community Council. A summit declaration on Indigenous identity fraud was also signed. It condemns any individual or group falsely claiming an Indigenous identity and requests all institutions, organizations, and levels of government to help end the appropriation. Nunatsiavut Government President Johan Lamp was one signature of the declaration.
We are only one Inuit group from the ITK, and there are 4 regions: the Inuvialuit, the Nunavut, Nunavik, and we are the Nunavut. And we have to go to the table to discuss the issues that are coming from this Indigenous Identity Fraud Summit. But it is not over today. But we will continue to wake up with the sun and most certainly to fight for our people.
The Mohawk territory of Kahnawake faces another environmental threat: air pollution. The Mohawk Council is now investigating as residents are worried about the air they breathe. APTN's Maricela Amador spoke with one of those residents.
Our community has a history of waste, chemical waste.
Carrie Diabo's life in the Mohawk community of Kahnawake has been marked by constant pollution, an issue that has afflicted many in the territory for decades.
We have factories surrounding our community, battery recycling plants that I've known that has been there, I don't even know how long, since I was a kid in high school. We used to suffer from rolling clouds of green smoke, foul smells.
Now, the community is once again facing another environmental challenge: air pollution.
This past year, I've been noticing it this way. We don't know where it's coming. It's coming from the east, northeast. So we have different industries coming from that end, so we don't know.
He says at night, a foul odor permeates the air.
Everybody's concerned. Ganawagi has a high rate of cancers, different types of diseases associated with contamination.
The Mohawk Council of Ganawagi is now investigating the issue after community members sounded the alarm. They believe the pollution could be coming from an industrial park in neighboring St. Catherine. Most worrying?
And you can see on this the relationship, just the proximity with TerraPure, the battery plant, and how it could be a nuisance at times.
The park is adjacent to the local high school, Ganawagi Survival School.
There was concerns. It was brought to our attention via an email last week about issues with the battery recycling plant. I think it's called TerraPure. And we reached out immediately to KIPO to ensure that our students were safe. KIPO responded immediately, telling us that there was no imminent danger at the school itself.
However, the Ganawagi Environment Protection Office, or KIPO, did record spikes in poor quality in the community around the same time the complaints were coming in. In a statement to APTN, TerraPure says, "We only became aware of concerns in the community late last week and immediately reached out to a representative to arrange a meeting. That meeting has yet to take place."
In 2008, the school was relocated closer to the 132 down this way.
According to Calvert, air pollution near the high school is nothing new. In fact, prior to 2008, the problem was worse because Survival School was then located even closer to the industrial park.
When I first started here, it was in 2003, I saw some of the issues. A lot of it was coming from Associated Steel with the car crushing. There's all day you hear the cars going through, but every now and then, there'd be a small fire or something, and there was a noticeable odor.
Chief Cody Diabo is in charge of the environment portfolio at Council. He says there have always been concerns about the school's proximity to the industrial park in St. Catherine.
There's been times where the school had to be sort of let out the students, sent home because of either air quality in the area, just from the smell and different sites of, the different activities that were going on there.
In terms of this current situation, Chief Diabo says that the Mohawk Council has not been able to determine where the air pollution is coming from. According to the chief, the council has purchased new air quality monitors.
As soon as those get into the territory and we set them up, we'll be able to give more data in terms of what it is. So right now, all we can do is either speculate or just say maybe there's a link and it's warranting further investigation.
In a statement to APTN, the City of St. Catherine says environmental protection is a priority. We take these concerns seriously and intend to shed light on this issue. In addition to our internal efforts, a meeting between the City of St. Catherine and Ganawagi officials is also scheduled to take place in the very near future.
It's going to take everybody to solve sort of these issues. Nobody's going to be able to do it in silos, but we need to share that information and work together, but we need to build a relationship first. The Environment Ministry, we in general on sort of the consultation end, which I'm involved in for other projects and things like that, needs a lot of work.
The chief notes that the relationship with Quebec also needs improvement in order to better address environmental issues together.
We have to clean up. There's a push. I'm not calling it a campaign. There's a push now. The community's taking matters into their own hands, and we're cleaning up our community.
However, he believes that currently not enough is being done to remediate the situation. Maricela Amador, APTN National News, Ganawagi, Quebec.
When we return, Rebecca Strong is the new winner of Canada's Got Talent. We'll hear from her next. Welcome back. Thousands of people from across our country is still celebrating for Rebecca Strong. She was crowned the winner of Canada's Got Talent with a strong and beautiful performance. She has made history as the first ever Indigenous woman to win the competition, and she is also $1 million richer. APTN video journalist Rachel May caught up with Rebecca on her win and what's next for her.
Rebecca, you have just won $1 million. Last night, Rebecca Strong from Prince Albert took the Canada's Got Talent stage by storm with her performance of Rolling in the Deep by Adele. Strong said that when she got to the final two, she had to remind herself to take a deep breath.
I had a lot of emotions going through me. I was mentally preparing myself for either losing and winning, but I was just happy to be up there.
As the first Indigenous woman to ever win Canada's Got Talent, Strong says she hopes Indigenous youth take this as a sign they can accomplish their dreams.
But I just want my Indigenous youth to change the world and become mainstream. And I want everyone to incorporate their culture in all of their art and be proud of where they come from.
As for what she's planning to spend the $1 million on, first a hot pink truck, and then helping her family pursue their dreams.
A recording studio is very important. I want to be able to record my music. And my sister and my dad's, they make music as well. So that'd be very awesome that I could help them as well.
Strong says she's hoping to record a debut album with original songs as soon as she can, then hit the road for a tour. Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
So glad to see. South of the border, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act was passed in 1990 in part to hasten the return to Native care of ancestral remains dug up and placed in museums. But 34 years later, Indigenous leaders say too many ancestors remain held in public institutions. This year, new rules governing the act went into effect that many hope will finally bring those ancestors home. Mary Annette Pember has more.
As of January, nearly 100,000 Indigenous remains were still being stored in public institutions across the country. Recently, I visited one such institution in Ohio.
I'm standing on the campus of the Ohio History Connection in Columbus, Ohio, the home of the country's largest public collection of Native American, Native Hawaiian, and Alaska Native human remains. The organization and associated museum is headquartered in the building behind me. But the more than 7,000 ancestors' remains held by the Ohio History Connection are stored in warehouses nearby. Concerned about theft and vandalism, Ohio History Connection leaders wouldn't allow ICT News to film these buildings. The remains have languished here for decades, but recent changes in the federal Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, or NAGPRA, have placed a 5-year deadline for museums and public institutions, such as the Ohio History Connection, to repatriate ancestors' remains to tribes.
Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, Brian Newland.
My name is Brian Newland. I am a citizen of Bay Mills Indian community.
Says the new rules are long overdue and will help us, quote, heal from some of the more painful times in our past. Native leaders agree.
I think we all have heard these issues for generations. These are the things that our grandparents talked about, and this is something that we can do. You know, I think I don't know many families that would leave their relatives somewhere.
When we do things like repatriate the ancestral remains of Indigenous people, is we enhance everyone's humanity. We make it more possible for all of us to get along with one another.
Under the new NAGPRA regulations, Indigenous peoples will have the final word on the affiliation and disposition of the nearly 100,000 of their ancestors' remains held by institutions throughout the United States. In the past, organizations like the Ohio History Connection were the sole arbiters of which tribes, if any, had legitimate connections to these vast collections. By claiming that most remains were unaffiliated or unconnected to contemporary tribal groups, the institutions were legally allowed to keep ancestors in their collections to be used for research or other purposes. As of January 13, 2024, however, the supremacy of the Western worldview, at least in archaeological terms, has officially been put on notice.
Without a doubt, repatriation is more than a healing exercise. I think it really does something to change the power dynamics and also change public perception about who contemporary Native people are.
I don't know that America really understands how big this issue is.
Marionette Pember, ICT News.
Now here's Fraser Needham in Ottawa on what's ahead on Nation to Nation today.
We'll talk to Métis Nation of Alberta President Andrea Sandmeyer about why she thinks the Manitoba Métis Federation is on the wrong track with its Indigenous Identity Fraud Summit that happened this week. APTN's Kathleen Martins has been attending the Jeremy Skibicki murder trial every day this week. She is here to talk about what it means for the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And Yellowknife Dr. Courtney Howard is on the show to talk about how wildfires affect a person's health. All this immediately after this evening's national news broadcast.
Thank you, Fraser. We have to take a short break, but when we return, we'll tell you how climate change is impacting one Indigenous community in the United States. On the East Coast, St. John's 6+, Charlottetown 19. Northern Quebec, Nuujiwak 2, La Grande River 2 as well. Quebec City 16, Montreal 15. Southern Ontario, Ottawa 20, Toronto 20 as well. Northern Ontario, Wawa 18, Elliott Lake 18 as well. Northern Manitoba, Churchill 5, Norway House 11. Southern Manitoba, Gimli 11, Winnipeg 12 with sun. Southern Saskatchewan, Saskatoon 12, Regina 12 as well. Uranium City 5, Buffalo Narrows, sunny at 9 degrees. Northern Alberta, Fort Chipewyan 5 with sun, Peace River 5 as well. Edmonton 9, Calgary 7 in southern Alberta. In BC, Vancouver 12, Kamloops 14. Northern BC, Dease Lake 1, Smithers 6 with a bit of cloud. Dawson 1 and Mayo 2. Northwest Territories, Wati 4, Yellowknife 6 with a little bit of cloud. And Fort McPherson 13, Colville Lake 6+. Chesterfield -5, Whale Cove -1. Iqaluit -2, Igloolik -7. We go now to Washington State, where our partner Indian Country Today has launched a 5-year project looking at the impact of climate change in tribal communities. ICT's Mark Chahant has this report from the Quinault Nation and its plans to move an entire village up and out of the way of rising seas.
I'm here in Tahola on the Quinault Indian Nation. Today the sea is calm, but the sea is also relentless. It keeps rising. The community of Tahola faces floods every year, and in 2021, people were evacuated. Plus, there are king tides, the highest tide of the year, that pushes water back several streets. So more than 20 years ago, this community began talking about relocation.
So the water was coming in from the river and just coming directly into the village. And it was just kind of coming in through the driveway and then coming in through the rocks. It probably filled up both of these streets here within 2.5, 3.5 hours maybe. And then where we were standing now, we probably got up to, a little over 12 inches.
What makes the Quinault story so powerful is that it's a window into our future. The idea that, like it or not, a changing climate will determine how we live, where we will live, what we will eat, and how much it's going to cost. Quinault is extraordinary in so many ways. The geography ranges from glaciers to ocean. On the coast here, climate changes now. Every year, there are threats from storm surges and king tides. And on the Quinault Nation, that has meant a thoughtful, long-term approach to a solution that preserves community and the tribe's values.
Tribes have really been at the leading edge of people in this country feeling the impacts of climate change. And of course, tribes have been warning about this for a long time.
Indigenous values and teachings are finally getting centered and put in that limelight because that paradigm shift the rest of society has to do. Indigenous and Native people are already doing that.
And we know this, the floods from storm surges will increase over time.
There you go.
this is the beginning.
I think high tide's here in about 2 more hours. So you can see the ocean here kind of starting to wave up, but as you look down, you can actually see there's a ton of driftwood sitting up here, and it just keeps...
So for several years now, the Quinault Indian Nation has been in the process of planning a move of the village of Tahola from the mouth of the Quinault River to higher ground. This process started more than 20 years ago, showing the firsthand complexity of how climate change impacts one community.
We're at this place in time where the world is on a trajectory that can't go any further. It's not sustainable. And so we're starting to witness everything collapse around us. We're seeing ecosystems collapse. We're seeing political systems collapse. And as everything around us collapses, those things that we stand on to be true, to be timeless, we are rising.
So we were trying to come up with a strategy to where we could get elders to be the very first part of the relocation, and rightfully it should be the ones that are most affected. So we recently just did win an award.
There are immediate concerns. The next flood is only a storm away, and the homes that survive the last ones are sometimes infected with black mold and other health concerns. The new village is about a half-mile away on higher ground. The Quinault Nation has built most of the infrastructure, streets, housing plats, sewage.
So what you can see here is the development of our first phase, but as far as building the houses, that's still a whole nother phase to go. So I know we were talking about...
And reflecting the nation's priorities, the Generations House, the first building, is a center for elders and children.
This was our most modern effort to relocate our most vital citizens.
There are still many questions to be answered. What happens to an elder who has worked their whole life and paid off their mortgage, but because they live in a flood zone, they have to start all over again? How does that work? And who pays for all of this? The Quinault Nation has not figured out yet where more than $450 million will come from.
We recently just did win an award for, I think, $1.9 million from HUD, and that was to construct 6 senior units. So that's going to be our first go.
And here's the thing, the Quinault Nation is further along in this sort of planning than nearly every community on the planet. When we drove up the coast to get here, we passed through low elevation towns and even cities and saw the scale of the problem. And it's clear that neither the region nor the country are penciling out what has to be done and what that will cost.
ICT plans on visiting Quinault over the next 5 years to document how this project evolves from concept to concrete reality. That's all the time we have for our midday newscast. We will be back later in the day for our afternoon newscast. I'm Chris Nachkate. Hi miigwech, masicho, and thank you for watching.